Okay, so at this point we have both our login page and home page, which are being displayed at their respective routes. So now the question is, how do we make it so that users can only visit the home page if they're authenticated, and they can only visit the login page if they're not authenticated? Okay, so there's actually a few different ways we could go about this. One way that we could go about this, which is generally considered to be the more complex and error-prone way, would be inside each page to actually check if a user is authenticated, and if they're not authenticated, then basically redirect them back to the login page. And vice versa for the login page. We want to check if they're authenticated. If they're already authenticated, we want to send them to the home page. So the way that we can do this in React is by using a special component from the React Router DOM package, which is called redirect. So essentially what this redirect component does, I'm just going to import that here, import redirect from React Router DOM. Essentially what this component does is if it gets displayed inside JSX, right, inside the JSX of any component, it will try and redirect the entire application to a different URL. To show you what I mean here, let's imagine that our home page is checking to see whether or not our user is authenticated. For now, we'll just say const is auth equals false. Okay, let's just imagine that they're not authenticated, so we'd want to redirect them. What we could do in this case, if we wanted to use this redirect component now, is we would basically say return is auth, and basically if the user's auth, we're going to return the regular home page. Otherwise, what we would do is we would return the redirect component. Okay? Now the redirect component, what it looks like when we display it in JSX, we say redirect, and it takes a single prop called to, and that will basically tell the application where to redirect to, okay? As you might have guessed by the name of the prop. So essentially what this will do is if isAuth is false, which just for testing purposes we've set it to false here, it will display this redirect component, which will automatically redirect the user to wherever we specify here. So in other words, if isAuth is false here, we're going to send the user back to the login page. To see what this looks like, what we're going to do, our application's still running, so let's just head back and take a look. If we try and go now to localhost 3000, what we're going to see is that immediately it redirects us to the login page. Okay, so that's exactly what we want with that. So everything's working out well there. So let's do the opposite now with our login page. Okay, our login page, what we could do is we're going to do the same thing. We're going to import the redirect component from React Router DOM. Not sure why it wanted to import that from React Router, because that wouldn't work. But anyway, the next thing that we're going to do is say const is auth, and again, just for testing purposes here, we're going to say equals true. So we're going to simulate what would happen if the user was already authenticated. And just to make this work, let's change isAuth to true here as well. Okay, so that it doesn't get it stuck in an infinite loop of redirecting back and forth between these two pages. Okay, and then what we would do is we would just say return is auth. And if the user's already authed, in that case, what we want to do is display the redirect, since we don't want the user to be able to visit the login page if they're already authenticated. So we're going to say redirect to, and we would send them to the home page in this case. And that's all we'd really have to do on this page. So the next thing, let's just test this out, I suppose. We'll try and go to /login and hit enter. And sure enough, it will just automatically redirect us to the home page. All right, so that's one way of doing it. And, you know, as I said before, this is generally considered to be the more error-prone way of doing this. Now, you might wonder why that is, because honestly, the logic that we've written here seems pretty simple. It's literally like 3 lines that we've added to these components. Well, the reason that I don't recommend doing it this way is because, in general, the logic for redirecting users and authenticating, all that kind of stuff, gets a lot more complicated than what we have here, right? This is the nice, clean, shiny, new application here that only has 2 or 3 lines for this logic. But in general, things can get pretty complex, right? Imagine that, let's say, different users had different permissions and you only wanted admins to be able to visit a certain page, and you only wanted non-admins to be able to visit another page, and you only wanted members of some group to be able to visit the group page, so on and so forth. The point here is that with this kind of logic, we generally want to encapsulate it inside its own component. So that's what we're going to do. What we're going to do, instead of actually having each page worry about its redirecting logic, is inside our app component, we're actually going to use a different component than this route here. Essentially, we're going to just create our own component, which we'll call auth route and unauth route. So we're going to create two here. And those are basically going to be what take care of all the redirecting logic. And that'll leave our pages free to just, be happy, carefree little pages and not worry about all this big bad user authentication stuff. So let's see what that would look like. What we're going to do is create a new folder inside our source folder, which we'll call components here. And we're going to create two new components inside of here. One of them, as I said, is going to be called auth route. And the other one, we're just going to give it the name unauth route. Not super creative, but it works. And here's what these are going to look like. Essentially, each of these, we're going to say export const auth route. Each of these components is going to take some props. First of all, it's going to take a prop specifying whether or not the user is authenticated. So we'll say is authed. And then it's just going to take the rest of the props that get passed to it. You'll see why it does this in just a second, but we do need to get all of those other props by using the spread operator here. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do, right, we're going to use that same redirect component that we saw earlier from React Router DOM. So we'll say import redirect from React Router DOM. And all we're going to do for this auth route is we're going to check if the user's authed, and if they are, we're going to just return a regular route component. Otherwise, we're going to return a redirect component. So, in other words, what we're going to do is say return is authed. We're going to use a ternary operator here, and we're going to say if the user's authed, we want to just display a regular route. And here's why we did the spread operator thing with the props. We're just going to pass all of the props through to our route component by saying ... props. And essentially what that'll do is if the user's authed, this thing is just going to behave exactly like a regular route component. All right? Okay, so that's if the user's authed. Otherwise, we want to display that redirect. So we're going to say redirect and send them to the login page where they will have to put in their email and password. Okay, so that's our auth route. Our unauth route is going to look almost identical to this one, except it's going to be reversed. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste this code here, paste it into unauth route. We're going to have to change the name here, unauth route. And essentially, we're just going to reverse these things by putting the route below the redirect. So in other words, if the user's already authenticated, we're going to redirect to, and we're going to change this to the home page here. Okay, so if the user's already authed, we're going to send them to the home page. They don't need to be at this unauthed route. Otherwise, if the user's already authed, it's just going to behave exactly like a regular route. All right, so now that we have our authed and unauthed route components, let's actually add those to our app component. And the way we're going to do that, we won't need this route anymore. I'm just going to remove that. Oh, and actually, now that I've done that, I realized that we have to first import the route component into both our authed and unauthed routes. So let's just say import route from React Router DOM. Oops, here, we'll want to put that right here. Redirect and route. And same thing for unauthed route. We're just going to say redirect, and we want to import the route component as well. All right, so now in our app component, we're just going to import both of those routes we defined. We'll say import authed route from ./components/authed route. Same thing for our unauthed route. Import unauthed route from components/unauthed route. Okay, and now we just have to replace these things with whatever we want, whatever the equivalent component here would be. For our home page, this is strictly an auth route, so we're going to replace the route here with auth route. And for our login page, this is going to be an unauth route. So, oops, I changed the wrong one there. Unauth route and unauth route. And I forgot to do this one. Auth route. There we go. Okay, so now this should all work without either of our pages having to know about it. So what we can do is just delete the redirect from both our home page and login page. So we're just going to return the home heading in this one, just like that. And here, let's remove isAuthed as well. We don't need that. And in our login page, we're going to remove redirect. We're going to remove isAuthed. We're going to remove this redirect, and we're just going to return the regular JSX from before. Okay, so everything should be working. Doesn't look like we have any errors. Let's take a look now at our application. Oh, first, what we need to do is actually pass in isAuthed from our app component. So as you're going to see, what we're going to do here is have our app component be the one, at least temporarily, that controls whether or not the user's authed, right? So what we'll do is say const isAuthed equals, and let's just try it with false first. So for this one, for the auth route, we're going to have to pass in that isAuthed prop that we defined. So isAuthed. And for unauth route, we're going to say isAuthed. And now it should work. Let's just go back here, and if we try and go to the home page now, what you'll see is that it doesn't let us. And likewise, if we change isAuthed to true, there we go, and I'm going to save it. What you'll see is that it won't let us go to the login page. It automatically redirects us to the home page. So that's how we create both auth-only and unauthed-only routes in React. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.